For everyone with an interest in MASH, or more broadly, steatotic liver disease, Surf's Up. Season 5, Episode 1 of Surfing the MASH Tsunami, our return after a month off in January for various reasons, starts now.
This week on Surfing the MASH Tsunami.
It's about stimulating that conversation for being liver aware, not necessarily liver disease aware, but liver health aware.
You use the phrase liver aware, which I think I like better than liver health aware or liver disease aware. As we talk about frequently, to go back to Stevens, the liver is the canary in the coal mine. Then, in fact, you really need to understand what it means to be the canary. I'm wondering, how do we align education of the patient with education of the frontline treaters so that everything moves in lockstep and it doesn't create bad impression, bad taste?
But I think it'll take a lot of time to really reach the broad group of physicians to implement this type of patient referral pathways that we've been discussing. I think we very well established some of the numbers, the pitfalls, the downsides, and the strengths of screening in at-risk populations, but we gotta get it out there.
We are currently only educating physicians to prescribe. We are not educating healthcare providers like myself and allied health who sit in front of the patients longer and more frequently than physicians to talk about these medications.
Every week, a global community of steatotic liver disease stakeholders comes together to explore the most critical challenges in diagnosing, treating, and developing medications for patients with MASLD and MASH. Join hepatology researcher and key opinion leader Professor Jörn Schattenberg, liver health advocate Louise Campbell, and pricing and forecasting guru Roger Green as they discuss the implications of 2024's key events on patient care, this week on Surfing the MASH Tsunami.
So, as I said, we were off for a month in January. This episode is simply Louise and Jörn and me, and we will be updating about January, kicking around some of the things we anticipate, seeing that'll be interesting over the next year. And I will tell you at the end of the episode a little bit about what you have to look forward to for the next couple of months. It should be pretty exciting. At any rate, Louise is in Australia, which means that Jörn is ready for bed. Louise woke up early, and I'm in the middle of my day. How are you, folks? Brave one, go first. Who wants to say hi first?
I'll say hi. Don't call me silly. Is that the thing? We're all up and around. But yes, it's nice to see everybody. It's nice to be back on our boards with our earphones on. Not unusual from around the world, so it's nice to see everybody again.
It is nice. And Louise, what's the temperature in Perth right now at 3:30 in the morning?
I think we probably dropped to about 22, 21 overnight because we're in our third heat wave of the year, and it's predicted to go up to around about 42, 43 degrees.
To translate that for any of our folks in the States who don't do that naturally, it's probably about 71 now, on the way to about 107, 108. And I asked Louise if she thought that was global warming. She said she can't figure out why, but that's what's going on. Jörn, I'm guessing it's not that kind of temperature in Germany in February. That's just a hunch. But
It's not. I'm at a comforting 9 Celsius, 48 Fahrenheit, 9:30. Oh, it's 8:30. You see, I'm really confused here. I'm very happy to be back on with you guys. Good to see you and looking forward to our conversation.
And it's the middle of the day here in Pennsylvania, and it's about the same temperature as you have in Mainz, Jörn, about 9 or 48, depending upon how you want to look at it. We've had a relatively mild winter, although we had snow on the ground in Philadelphia for the first time in 3 years, which we had not had for a while. So why don't we start the way we might typically start, although we're going to talk more about our lives. One thing in the past week, good news, professional or personal, or an interesting fact that you learned in the last week, which might be where I go. Brave one, go first.
Well, let me start scientifically. EASL abstracts have been finished 2 weeks ago, I think, submission deadline, and I volunteered to review those abstracts. So I've been working on it hard. I think I have 3 days left. There's another 50 or so in my inbox I want to look at, but I'm already excited about all the stuff. Obviously, can't talk about the embargo, about the details yet, and I'm not sure every abstract's going to make it, but it'll be very exciting, and I'm looking forward to meet everybody in Milano for EASL.
Fantastic. Okay. Louise?
I'll start with something that's not scientific, in the fact that for January I decided to not just talk the talk, but do some of the walking, get on the exercise for getting healthier for January. I know now how hard it is to get people to do that because I didn't make it past the warm-up before I pulled a calf. But I am now getting back onto the treadmill. I'm not a hard surface runner, My bones are older than yours, John. So therefore, it is hard. And when we say get fit, you got to work past the warm-up stages and programs first. And I did this because Donna Cryer was so motivated and talking about how fit she was getting after her recent illness that I was thinking, I don't even do that. And I'm not unwell. She spurred me on to try and do something like injure. So keep it simple out there.
Louise and I, kindred spirits that we are, each pulled a calf muscle at about the same time. Mine was playing pickleball. I picked up pickleball in the last couple of months and managed at this moment to have a sprained wrist, which was a pickleball injury, and a badly pulled calf muscle, which is a pickleball injury, and a cold that has nothing to do with pickleball. They did, however, strap my leg up so that I could take my wife to Key West last weekend for her birthday and do our typical 15,000 steps a day. Although I refused to run with her. That felt like a little bit too much. But it was cold in Key West. I don't think it got above 15, maybe it got 17 one day when we were there. It's high 60s. But it was delightful. You eat and you drink and you sleep and you walk by the ocean. It's all good.
Sounds great. So, Louise, one question. Do you combine that with a sober January? I think that's a British thing to do too, right? A dry January?
To be fair, I did.
Good for you. Good for your liver.
I didn't eat red meat. I waited for my husband to go back to Australia. And then I chose to, because I do eat a little bit more healthy these days. It's for you guys. But I actually didn't feel too well after eating excess for 3 or 4 days over Christmas. So I thought, well, let's do it. But my baseline heart rate in 3 weeks dropped from 65 to 52 with a bit of exercise and a lot of improved diet. So we see that when we defat the livers on the fibre scans, when for some of our clients, it actually does drop their heart rate. You see all of that beneficial. So I thought I would see it and talk the talk and walk the walk. But I limped for part of the end of January.
So, Jörn, you'll be happy to know that in America, it's called dry January, but they've now got dry January, they've got damp January, they've got dry-ish January.
It comes in a lot of flavors.
Yeah, the old movie, The Big Chill, one of the great lines was that rationalizations are more important than sex, because who's ever going a day without rationalization? I think this is just one of the brilliant ones. And before we get started, I have one little fact that Louise probably knew but hasn't mentioned, which is Louise and Jörn have something in common, which is Jürgen Klopp, whose first coaching assignment was in Mainz and then went to Dortmund for a while and now is in Liverpool. I didn't realize he started in Mainz, Louise.
Oh, yeah. I did know that. And that was a nasty way to lead into the football. My boys defended like Crystal Palace, my other boys, this weekend, and lost to Arsenal. So Robert Mitchell-Thane will be really happy.
Like my boys, except we're scoring again, so that's a better thing. In fact, one of the things I missed this morning was the semifinals of the Asian Cup, where our captain, Son Heung-min, was playing Georgia. South Korea hasn't won an Asian Cup in 64 years, despite being arguably the most consistent country in the competition. So we're hoping for good things for them. All right, enough football. So everybody has missed us since December. In fact, I got notes all through the month of January saying, when are you coming back? So, hey, we're back. And I would like for us each to take a few minutes and talk about what we've been working on in the past month. Jörn, in your case, when we were on with Scott Friedman in the December episodes, he talked about the idea that sharing a department is leadership, and anybody who describes it as being administrative or merely managerial is missing the point. So 2 months in, how is it? How's it different?
That's an interesting question, and I have to say it's a lot of fun. Obviously, it's a transition for me professionally. While I approach it with respect, it's a lot of fun working with a talented group of colleagues every day. Obviously, the focus is a little broader. We have big inpatient department, endoscopy, a lot of outpatients running through our clinics. And I think something I bring to the department at this time is my passion and experience in treating patients with end-stage liver disease, particular metabolic fatty liver disease, obviously, or metabolic dysfunction, associated steatotic liver disease. Now, we've been slowly talking about getting trials up to enroll patients, improving our diagnostic capabilities. The department was in transition for 3 years. So there's some aspects that need to be improved at this point, but there's a lot of good things that have been in place and were kept in place, and so we're working on that. And from a philosophical perspective, I think I try to go slowly and bring my expertise in, and so far, it's been at least, let's say, joyful from my side. The team is good, strong going.
Did I see you post in LinkedIn that you're hiring?
That's right. There are 2 big EU grants that have recently been approved, and they're in a preparatory phase. One of the big calls is Liver AIM, which is a big consortium with industry partner, and the IHI call coordinated out of Barcelona this time around. And we're looking at the value of screening, even conducting a clinical trial in screening, but also following up patients we recruited in previous consortia including litmus. So there'll be a lot of strong data coming up with long-term follow-up, and that's the good news here. There's one or two other consortia getting ready for that. The arena of biomarkers, clinical outcome research funded by the European Union and strong European centers is looking good for the next 5 years, and Hamburg now is one of the centers that has joined those groups.
So you're right at the heart of it. Very congratulations.
Can I ask, because all of that's absolutely fantastic, and getting into the department, how people have responded to a more liver-centric view or a conversation that gets, have you thought about the liver, or have we looked at this? How have people been genuinely enlightened, or I never thought about that? How have you found that start?
Well, in the departments, there's typically a structure where you have people focused on certain specialities, and they divide in classes and in groups. And the group that's been studying liver disease has been doing so successfully, very clinically oriented, very little clinical trials, I would say. So one of my first thoughts was trying to build a clinical study team, study coordinator. There are a few studies ongoing, but very little. So this is something I want to build over the next years. And the work you have to put into to recruit a patient into a clinical trial, or to offer a patient, consider offering, discussing pros and cons, getting ready to obtain informed consent, all that additional work. The physician needs to know that he's backed up on that and has protected time, because it takes a lot of effort. And I think that's one of the changes I do plan to implement. Let them know that this is important for the team, and giving them the reassurance to take their time to discuss these treatment options with patients, which is not always done in all places. And I think that's one of the changes we're looking at this time. There's also some aspects of how does the patient navigate through the system. So where does he check in? Actually, they have a paging system, which I found very innovative. So the patient carries a pager, and as soon as the physician's ready, he gets a page. It reads, move to FibroScan, room XYZ, and then he gets called to the physician. So it's a little bit, that was interesting. But then on the other hand, I think some of the, for example, outpatient diagnostics, including FibroScan, weren't as routinely set up for all the appointments. And we worked on some of these pathways for patients, even in the hospital. No discussing pathways outside of the hospital, but it's not set that all these diagnostics you need to assess a patient are necessarily run in every inpatient hospital, or let's say outpatient hospital visit.
So which diagnostics were they regularly running when you got there?
So I'd say, the standards is labs, ultrasound, physical exam, and history. The elastography-based techniques were more reluctantly ordered, and I think this is one thing I wanted to change and really implement it for all patients. The positive thing in the department is that there is a strong radiology group that has a long-standing interest in generating imaging data for those patients. So that was a very easy transition and a good conversation I had with my colleagues at radiology there. And it'll be easier for me compared to the old place to, for example, obtain MRI, PDFF, even MRE, and some experimental imaging technologies. So it's a good place for advanced imaging techniques.
That's exciting. And we'll ask every couple of months how the ride is going.
And how many pages you still have?
You mean the pagers are all
in the UK? We'd lose our pages.
Yeah.
They go out the door. People would forget. I forget. I've got pages on me every now and again when I used to carry them.
In the US, I think it's less they go out the door, and more people will start selling them on the street right outside the door, depending upon where your hospital's located. You need to make a buck where you can.
So then you have a different patient showing up for the physician's exam versus the ultrasound.
There you go. If you did not want to reveal how much you were drinking, you might choose to pay someone to take your pager and go do your scans.
No, overall, I think it's been a very interesting and rewarding experience up until here. Again, received a lot of positive feedback, great group of colleagues, and very happy to bring in my expertise and build the team further with them and the focus around liver disease.
Fantastic. So, Louise, what's your month been? Besides the recognition from EchoSense I know about, and the going from London to Australia I know about, and the pulled calf I go about. What you been up to?
I suppose it's been quite busy. Towards Christmas, we launched the new website, which is a little bit more friendly, a little bit more focused on where we want to improve liver health, and particularly fatty liver disease, and targeting that, because I think when we talk about muzzles, it's still muffled here in this side of the globe. So I have to change my language in between, and I'm just getting used to the new nomenclature. Now I have to change it back to various bits here. But most people, until they come into healthcare, still refer to, and they look up up fatty liver. They don't look up marzled, MAFLD. They haven't been exposed to those terms until we get into a diagnostic community and then look at that. So I think the reality is 99% of people who look up the liver health issue still look up those main terms. So we stick with that, but we look at the strength. So that, and I was looking at some figures yesterday. So our metrics for those have gone up like over 2,500% for accessing the website and things like that, which is good. We've always had good.
That's fantastic.
It's very promising. Convert that into different things, obviously, as we know, is the trigger, but people are looking and to different areas. But we've always had a very strong page on interpreting the results because we make it easy. We color code it. We do things like that. But from Towers and Health, that's good. A lot of interest, obviously, as people want more access to easy obtainable lock and load diagnostics to just be able to come in to do small and bespoke rather than large academic units that have access to all of that. So that's what I'm enjoying seeing, that more people are trying to look at it as an option and see liver health or assessment of. I think I'd read a very good article in the Hepatology Journal, and I think it was by Emmanuel Toxides and the team that looked at quality of life, whereby quality of life in those who hadn't been diagnosed yet with fatty liver disease was a significant factor on poor quality of life. So where we look at quality of life studies, unless we've teased out who's got marzled and NAFLD, how can we say that was an illness that was affecting the quality of life or background of the diseases? So it raises questions for me on that. So we look at that. MyLife365.me has now gone live in India and France. So when I was fortunate enough to be invited to speak at the big EcoSense meeting in France, I was able to get some of the guys there to download it, including Lauren Sandering. So getting access for that. It is predominantly in English throughout the world, even in India, but we have had downloads. So we're now live in Canada, India, the US, UK, France, and Australia, which is absolutely great because what we're finding is more people are interested to put their FibroScan results on it and see that rainbow colour from poorer liver health to improving liver health as they make their lifestyle changes. And for physicians just to be able to open a simple app when a patient walks in and say, oh, there's my history for the last 2, 3, 4, 10 years, because we will put on your retrospective results. It's way easier than ploughing through notes. You literally see the rainbow improvement of their liver health, obviously measured by FibroScan. So that's going really well.
Louise, I was going to cut in and say, independent of the technology you're using to assess that, if you were able to visualize a result like that and have the patient reflect on changes, improvement, worsening, and let's say detach it from some of stigmatizing aspects, for example, body weight, or, they know weight goes up and down and my BMI, I can't really get it into there. I think that's a big gain for the patient, to detach it from something that's stigmatizing, but to have a readout that's physiological, pathophysiologically relevant and have it visualized.
And I think what they've enjoyed is the ability to see that minor changes, either in the quality of diet, when they get to your clinics, changes their liver health, but then to be able to see it and know those numbers. But if you not know the numbers, look at the colour changes. And we do a red to green colour through the spectrum, very similar to the steatosis grades that EcoSense use and the fibrosis from that. And the majority of our clients are the normal public health. It's steatotic liver disease, but they make a change. And then they can show their friends round a table. We've got guys in their 20s and girls who'll sit round a table and say, I can drink responsibly. This is my liver health. Have you tried this? So it's about stimulating that conversation for being liver aware, not necessarily liver disease aware, but liver health aware. And I think that's something that obviously we talk clinically here very much about liver disease. We know liver disease is the minority partner of poor liver health, with endocrine and cardiology being probably the two main ones. But to be able to walk into a cardiologist or an endocrinologist and say, well, this is my tracked liver health through my hepatology department or independent provider, and this is how it's improved. And again, that reinforces to endocrinologists, because I've seen some with pre-diabetes recently, that things can change rather than just the scales, because we're not interested off the hips, but we do want to see it out of the lobe. So that's by far the biggest biggest engagement that we're getting feedback on is the fact of people being able to track and walk into a doctor's office and go, I can see what my liver's done, and thank you, it's changing. And doctors quite like it because it literally shows a colour change or not, because we know FibroScan can be the biggest lie detector on, yes, I've changed my diet, doctor, or my alcohol intake, or I'm drinking less sugar beverages. So it's been busy.
So I'll tell you, you use the phrase liver aware, which I think I like better than liver health aware or liver disease aware, right? Because as we talk about frequently, to go back to Stephen, if the liver is the canary in the coal mine, then in fact you really need to understand what it means to be the canary, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got clinics here in Perth for this month. I did a few last week. I've got a few this week, and then I've got one later on in the month. The ones this week are booked out. And remember, FibroScan here is not Medicare refunded yet.
I was going to ask about that.
And I think when we get like any major health system where Medicare or there's a private payer system, once we get to a liver unit, Medicare is irrelevant because we use it as a diagnostic assessment within our own speciality. So Medicare is not relevant when you get to senior hepatology. But for people to be engaging and to be more interested, to have serial scans, to just check their health. And all I can say is my husband slightly indulged since the World Cup rugby in France. So he's back on his track. So we'll see. So it is interesting, but it pushing a slightly different liver-aware agenda to mainstream health, and being a mainstream health provider is certainly, oh my Lord, hard. It has been a hard 5 years, both in the UK, and obviously we have NICE who've approved, and all of that should go live around about the 1st of April, depending on codes and stuff. So it's been exciting, and it's going to be exciting, I hope. I'm busy.
So I'm having a realization as I listen to you that I'm delighted that my wife doesn't know anything about FibroScan, because she's a fitness instructor, so she's a diet hawk and she's an exercise hawk and all that stuff. But if I wanted not to reveal to her what I was doing, she wouldn't have the ability to scan my liver and say, it's not quite what you say it is. As you say, the best lie detector you work with.
It is. But if you do fitness and health, actually, I would say assess what we're doing internally, not just externally. I know a lot of people who juice stuff and don't look as good on the inside as they look on the outside.
I guess the only other question I had for you is, I know how tightly integrated you are with the FibroScan machine in the UK, and I understand the way you're operating in Australia. In the other markets where you are, how tightly are you integrated with FibroScans, and how does that work?
All of them are new. We heavily would advise people to now come to us to add liver health and liver awareness onto their corporate health assessments. Remember, liver disease and liver poor health account for the second leading cause of working lives lost, and arguably probably your biggest loss of employment. So we're working on that. We did a corporate screening where some people didn't actually want the blood test. They just wanted their annual FibroScan to see how they were doing. And putting in a work environment, when we do it, when we go there, people compete. And I think the competitive nature of people saying, well, I can beat you on your score. I am seeing a lot of people next week who are going, that can't possibly be true. My liver's got to be more healthy than yours, and have done that. This whole thing of making it non-stigmatized, a bit of let's help my diet and lifestyle. So we've added it to corporate packages. So again, if people want that, then we are very much keen to add that to your normal blood tests. It means a lot of blood tests don't calculate FIB4 in corporate packages. So let's have a look. There's things we can do to strengthen. Our workforce is our biggest advantage. And if a third of it is off sick every day, near enough, due to an underlying condition that we're not looking for, but we are assessing them for cardiovascular risks and type 2 diabetes, then we're still missing. But again, it's not where it's normally considered. Liver health is intrinsic to most things, and being liver aware could be part of everybody's improvement, because as I've said in the video, we wrote it out of the story both in healthcare and in life. We need to write the liver back into our health journey because it is so much part of nearly everything we do.
Excellent point. And when we get to the second point, part of this episode where we talk about what we think are interesting major trends in 2024, besides including but not limited to what happens if resmetirom gets approved by the U.S. My month's been a lot more prosaic. Basically, I've been dealing with lungs, which you can hear when I cough today, and a leg and an arm and a couple other things, and other family members dealing with various illnesses. But thank goodness it's the end of the month. Everybody's healthy now and back to life. The other thing we've done, obviously, is we've done some transitioning around the podcast. We've looked at a whole new graphic approach and then decided that was probably too much to do at once right now. So we've updated the name. We've decided it's now surfingmash.com. We've changed the logo a little bit. The most exciting thing that I think we've decided to do, and we will be rolling this out later in the month, is to insert a new section in the podcast, which we're calling Question of the Week. The idea being that we will be inviting audience members and sponsors and everybody who touches this podcast to send us questions, and we'll be creating our own. The goal will be to release one question question a week and then to see the answers that we get from people. My belief is the focus of question of the week should probably be on practical treatment issues, because where we grow this year, the podcast growth is going to grow in two directions. It's going to grow towards treaters on the clinical care pathway, and it's going to grow towards places where there are more folks on the commercial side or the product side or the treatment side, working in institutions or working. Madrigal's in the middle of staffing up a whole bunch of people in the U.S., several hundred. They're not the only ones who are doing that. So to have a place where people who are a little bit less experienced can ask questions in the ways that they want to ask them. And then we will every week devote 5 or 10 minutes at the back end of the podcast before we get to the business section, talking about one question and then introducing a new one. We've done some market testing on that. I think it will actually work this time. I'm sure it'll work this time. And I'm excited to invite more listeners to come in more regularly with the podcast. So that's my news for the month. Less exciting than what you guys have been working on. But frankly, getting healthy is really exciting. And I'm not talking about liver aware. I'm talking about lung aware and leg aware and arm aware and all this other stuff. But it's all good now. All right. So with that, let's shift gears a little bit for a while and take a look at some of the issues that we think will be evolving over the year. We asked people a lot about that in our year-end interviews. We got some really fascinating answers. But I want to start in clinical care pathway, not just because Louise mentioned liver aware, but because as we educate the world and the patient world, aligning the changes in patient demand, the changes in protocol, and making it flow smoothly is, I think, intrinsically a challenge. For those who listen, Naeem Alkhouri in his end-of-the-year interview shared a concern that if you run FIB4s and send everybody to get scanned, too many people are going to get scanned and then get negatives. And if they get negatives, they're going to go back to primary care, will stop doing the scans. And if they have positive results, at least in the States, hepatology will steal the patient. So I'm wondering, how do we align education of the patient with education of the frontline treaters so that everything moves in lockstep and it doesn't create bad impression, bad taste?
Yeah, that's a very good and challenging question. I've been thinking about this, obviously, with you guys in the podcast here for some time, Roger. Outside of our field, there is still very little knowledge on doing this. And also, we said that a couple of years ago, but we still don't have an approved drug. I think we're very close to it, but many physicians have not thought about screening for high-risk liver disease in their patient population. So I think we're ahead of the wave here a little bit. And by surfing, just to stay with our theme here, by surfing that wave and bringing it out, I think it'll take a lot of time to really reach the broad group of physicians to implement this type of patient referral pathways that we've been discussing. I think we very well established some of the numbers, the pitfalls, the downsides, and the strengths of screening in at-risk populations, but we got to get it out there. And really the big change is going to be the approved drug coming available. And I think that will open up colleagues listening to the offers and the thoughts and ideas we're having, and that will make a big difference. And it's going to happen this year. So I think it's good we know how to propose it.
Jörn's absolutely right. I would come at it from, obviously, the other side, whereby it's liver aware and it's liver health. If we just look at within our own speciality and akin, then Jörn's absolutely perfectly correct. If we widen that question to should we be, and from Naeem's initial point, if we're doing FibroScans and sending them and they're not the ones who we want, people are going to get concerned. But if we look at steatotic liver disease, pick up those patients with steatotic liver disease, and take out the ones with liver disease, that part, then we can improve steatotic liver disease. So the question to me needs to be overall reframed slightly. If we want to assess in health for what is affecting a third of all adults in the globe, and statistically 68.9% of Australian people with type 2 diabetes, not dissimilar around the world, and cardiovascular disease, then that's a different question to pure liver metrics, looking for liver disease in liver disease and that ultra concentrated population. So it becomes more that liver health issue for me. I would err on, I come from the liver health because I want to see the right people see the specialists like Jörn. I want to see the right people with poor liver health see endocrinologists, cardiologists a lot earlier. We've seen the figures again this week because it was World Cancer Day on Sunday, whereby liver cancer now makes up in the top 5 of male cancers. It's just outside the top 5 of women's cancers, but when we come to mortality, it's in the top 5 for both. So they are least survivable cancers. And we have a rapid rise around the globe of liver cancer. So all physicians are going to be seeing their population develop liver cancer. So we need to be reframing that slightly.
I have two thoughts listening to both of you. So I don't know if this is happening in other markets, other countries, really. And part of it could be because media that I listen to skews old because I tend to be a little bit older. You can't turn on a radio station in the States right now without hearing some medical practice advertising that if you come in there, they'll give you Wegovy. And here's how much weight you're going to lose. I mean, today, literally yesterday, Novo Nordisk announced that they were acquiring Catalent, who is one of their leading producers for Wegovy and Ozempic, and they were bringing them private and bringing them under the control of the Novo Nordisk venture group, which I assume is to rejigger their production capabilities, so they're dedicating more effort to semaglutide. So if patients start to stump, we've talked on several occasions in different ways about how GLP-1s confound this whole process. But now, if you're in a place where obese people are coming into doctors' offices, or even worse, call it teledoc, you can pick up the phone, you can call a doctor, 10 questions, and they will prescribe over the mail, and they will ship you semaglutide or tirzepatide. I mean,
this is an approach to treat obesity, and I think it can be valid for some systems. It's driven by the success of the drug, obviously, and the inability to assess physicians maybe physically, or the demand of patients to not visit a physician but get some telemedical approach. And I think that's good for families. But obviously, these patients are not screened for liver disease, and their underlying cirrhosis is going to be missed. Now, if you go into a catabolic state, you lose a lot of weight. There could be concerns about the safety, in particular in advanced liver disease. Now, not all of these patients do have that, but I have a hard time with this telemedicine approaches that seem to be almost a commercial way to do medicine, where I would really propagate to assess the patient thoroughly before prescribing the drug, for example. Maybe that's a little bit of a European holistic approach. Obviously, all of that costs money, and somebody has to raise that money or spend that money. But it's important for us as a field that we come up with a solution to not miss the advanced liver disease cases in that obese population. Not all of them need to see us, but some do have an underlying liver problems. I'd like to get my hands on those.
So then let me be clear. I'm in complete agreement with what you just said. Okay. My concern is that bad money will drive out the good in this, or commercial intent will drive out medical intent in this. So that we'll have people who are obese and they will get this miracle drug they can just jab in their stomach. And it's amazing that just a little pinprick once a week can do so much. And they'll never deal with a physician who will evaluate their overall health, particularly their liver health, if they're not liver aware. And a lot of the patients will think they don't even need to go to a doctor at that point because they've got a teledoc doing their obesity. So this is the set of issues that concerns me.
I think it's more than that, though. We do have to state that none of this is operating under a Novo Nordisk license. Most of this is outside and in different markets. When Novo Nordisk are very clear that a lot of this is a non-prescribed way of doing this medication. So it's not a Novo Nordisk backed thing. But we see in the UK, we've had a number of programs since New Year on that's not physicians, it's non-physicians prescribing, or not even prescribing, that they can get hold of it. But this isn't just for those with obesity. This is for anybody who wants to go on a weight loss drug. Now, that's a different market. When you're slim and you're still using medications, these can be dangerous medications. I've said on the podcast before that I would like anybody on these drugs, whether or not it's in endocrinology or anywhere that they're being prescribed, to have basic liver function tests, the FIB4. We know semaglutide does not work in those with cirrhosis. So looking and revealing that population, or fibre scanning them all, because we're missing all of that data as well in clinical care, which concerns me. We're treating MASH and MASLD, NAFLD and NASH with these medications, but not assessing the data which could be added to real world. But it's the other populations in the black market that this is driving, and I think you're right. But we get celebrities all of the time. I've personally seen celebrities who get fibre scans to monitor this. So it's a difficult world when a celebrity comes on, and it's all right for Sharon Osbourne now to be chirping the other way about how dangerous it can be, but she did use the medication. She's very public in that. But it's difficult. People want access.
Yeah, and I have some concern, at least in the States, that the free publicity around resmetirom after it approves will only make this louder and a little bit more confounding. It's not Madrigal's approach. Madrigal will go after the specialists because they understand that a lot of specialists need to be educated on a lot of stuff, but at least as I understand it. But there will be more PR around this. And I have some concerns about how we as a health system educate people to make sure that they stay on top of it. In different ways, each of you is an extremely responsible and aware treater, but you're not sitting at the end of a phone bank with a computer screen in front of you, asking people what address they want their Wegovy drop shipped to. And I couldn't agree with you more, Louise. It has nothing to do with Novo Nordisk.
No, any drug that people are interested in. I remember when the DAAs came out, I remember sitting in an ad board saying, if you price it this in one country and this in another country, you will drive a black market. No, we won't. I lived and worked on Little Egypt in London. Egypt had $1,000 for an entire course of Harmony, and they all just went to Egypt and got months and months and months worth of supply. So we were seeing, which is not, and it would have been seen in Germany, people turning up saying we're being treated, wanting viral loads to know what they're treating. And we're going, we don't know what you're on. So you drive something else. So it is a concern, but it's awareness. And I'm one for chirping about education. We are currently only educating physicians to prescribe. We are not educating healthcare providers like myself and allied health who sit in front of the patients longer and more frequently than physicians to talk about these medications, to talk about the proper management, to get out the conversation. So we will be watching the same press in news stories and getting information in the wrong way as the patients. So we don't know, and we won't know to be able to do this in the better way. And that's not dissimilar with semaglutide as it will be with resmetirom and the others that come along. It's going to get more complicated as hepatitis C did.
I mean, the big difference, Roger, is that we're going to get drugs in the first wave most likely approved that are weight neutral. And obviously, the obesity epidemic across the world, particularly in the US, is driving the phenomena you've been describing, that a lot of patients are looking for a solution for weight loss. In the arena of fatty liver disease, for the first wave of drugs, I don't think we're going to see it to the same extent. You'll need a specialist to assess the response to treatment. And I think it comes back to educating physicians to transfer a patient that's at risk for a pre-cirrhotic advanced disease to receive an assessment and potential treatment that will impact his underlying liver disease.
One of the things I'm going to try to do in the next couple of months is start a dialogue on this podcast with U.S. payers, because in a very practical way, all this is going to hit them. And if I were in their shoes, and I used to advise some of them, my concern right now would not be so much about controlling resmetirom as it would be about controlling all this other stuff and seeing if I could get on top of it or around it, because those challenges just might be huge. But we agree. So issue number one, Jörn, what exactly do you anticipate will happen when resmetirom launches?
That's a good question. So obviously there's going to be some time lag in Europe. So we'll see real world data coming from the US, and I'll be in close contact with my colleagues there to, gather their experience and see how it's done in real life. I mean, the other thing is that as a clinician, I do have the opportunity to participate in clinical trials testing resmetirom patients with cirrhosis, looking for outcomes. So that's my part of resmetirom experience there for some time, because again, we're not going to have an approved in Europe for some time after the US. What's going to happen? I think we're ready to recommend referral of the patients we'd like to see on drug, including FIB4, VCTE, maybe even some MR imaging in the US. And from what we've seen, the safety, I think it'll be, and the efficacy, it'll be a comfortable treatment situation for patients going on drug, not needing intensive safety monitoring. And the question will be how long to treat and does the patient respond? And I think we've seen some early responsiveness data looking at biochemical responses, but also VCTE responses. The question is going to be how do we combine it with treatment for the underlying comorbidities, including obesity, but also type 2 diabetes. And some of the post hoc analyses that are going to come out from the phase 3 trial are going to help us with that assessment. So I think it'll be around how to assess treatment response, how long keep the patient on the drug, how to combine it.
Those are exactly the right issues. Do you see better data emerging on those issues today?
Yeah, the focus obviously on the reporting of the primary endpoint, the analysis, getting it across to the regulators and seeing their assessment of the data that's been submitted. But there is obviously such a big database from the clinical trial. And then once it comes into practice with conditional approval, you're going to be able to actually do combinations in a real world setting, investigator initiated, which will at a rapid pace expand our knowledge and the ability to do combinations beyond post hoc analyses of the phase 3 trials.
So Louise, I saw you nodding and perhaps even taking notes. What are you thinking?
Well, I was thinking on what Jörn was saying, it's something in relating to your first question. Resmetirom will obviously be approved for those with liver disease. The prescribing of a drug that we know can defat and improve liver health being available to be prescribed outside liver disease, the same that Wegovy semaglutide is prescribed elsewhere for different reasons, and to whether or not that can be controlled, going back to your question. So that struck me. We are going to have a drug that can be available for that potential misuse. I suppose is the word. Do we have any data on drug-drug interactions and what it does for the absorption or malabsorption of other medications and that potential? Because, of course, it's going to go out beyond a trial population to real world. Therefore, lots more medications will be now utilised. And I know we have the yellow card system to record various aspects, but do we know anything about drug-drug interactions, Sean, from the clinical trials particularly? Because I know the safety profile's good, but...
Yeah, there were no major issues on drug-drug interactions. Nothing difficult or not manageable in clinical care. I mean, that's standard practice, and it wasn't complicated. So no, I'm not too concerned on that issue.
So it's those things I tend to see more in the real world when people are walking through, and we're looking at. So I'll be looking at those.
There were some limitations regarding the degree of thyroid hormones you're taking at baseline in the clinical trial. And obviously, this could be different in a real-world setting, but I haven't really seen a signal that this changes the levels dramatically. And again, no concerns from my side.
The other thing I was going to comment on was, obviously in the US, you can advertise drugs on TV. How the advertising is going to work, and looking at the metrics of how the awareness rises and who starts to look for what and why within that public engagement. I'm actually quite interested to see how that's going to work and how that's going to be handled.
I have no knowledge, okay, but I would be surprised to see significant consumer advertising for at least 6 months, maybe a year. Because the last thing you want to do is send patients, this goes back to where I started. You don't want to send patients into doctors' offices when the doctors don't know what to do. So doctors have to get educated first. And in fact, the most compelling thing about a campaign would be to educate patients that there's a drug, but to know about your liver, you got to go to a specialist. Because going back to my first concern, if you start doing consumer advertising too early, you're going to flood patients into primary care practices. And I don't believe the Madrigal sales force is going to be geared up to handle primary care at launch. So you might wind up sending patients into doctors who don't know what the question is. And that's really a bad thing for everybody. So I agree with you. It'll be interesting to watch.
And what else will be interesting on that is I remember being at some very heated ARSLD and EASL meetings about patients wanting access and the drug companies ruling out the cost. And there was obviously hepatitis C is the best one. It was predicted, I think, to take 3% of the American medical GDP, things like that. And therefore, this whole anger at not being allowed access. We've obviously had the experience of being turned down in the past and people getting disappointed. So there are patients out there who want access to the medications in the near future. So they are well aware. So it is a very difficult balancing act, and particularly to be not you've got who obviously in India have a prescribed medication but the first Western, a US approved medication is going to be interesting.
I think I might go all the way to fascinating, actually. I might go past interesting, all the way to fascinating, maybe with mouths agape. Let me go back to GLP-1s let me go back to incretins for a sec, okay? When Lilly put out today, press release or yesterday, on the phase 2 fatty liver results with tirzepatide, they talked about elimination of MASH, although I don't know exactly what that means. It's a 3-paragraph press release, but they didn't say anything about reduction in fibrosis. No, let me amend that. They said that there was a clinically meaningful reduction in fibrosis and gave no numbers. So I don't know how that's going to play into any of this. But if you start seeing publications that GLP-1s or available incretins have an impact on scarring, I don't know what that does, but it becomes another confounder. So we're at the bottom of our hour. It feels like time has flown. I guess we all haven't talked to each other in a long time. So on close, what's the one thing that each of you would like to make sure we touch on specifically in an episode sometime in the next month?
Roger, I think I'd like to expand on some of the anti-obesity drugs we've been seeing, and I'm talking about mechanisms that expand the GLP-1, a mechanism that does have an indirect effect on weight loss, indirect effect on liver fibrosis and promoted NASH resolution, but by combining them with some other MOAs, including glucagon or GIP, I think this is an interesting topic, and considering the dominance of weight loss drugs at this point, if we combine them with more liver-specific effects, this will be a very interesting topic moving forward, and I think we should be discussing this in the future.
You know, Jörn, I think that's great. I would like to go after that topic with people who can talk about the medical issues and also the patient issues and maybe even the payer issues all at once. Let's take a 360, even if it takes us a couple of weeks of episodes. Let's take a 360 on that and see how all the pieces might fit together. I think that's fantastic. Louise?
I think for me, it would be looking at education strategies, how we're going to get the best supportive network out there. And we obviously have to design clinical pathways that are going to fit what's coming. And a lot of us don't necessarily have clinical pathways that all function in the right way at the right time. So I think that's a big ask. I think we've also, in Australia, we've got the finalisation of the new recommendations for fatty liver. And we're hoping to get Leon Adams and a couple of other physicians onto the podcast when that's in its final stages. So that's exciting because Australia are getting there.
Hopefully, while you're in Australia, so that I'll have to get up at midnight or 2 a.m. or something to do that one, but that'll be absolutely worth it.
Well, it'll be certainly an interesting time zone, potentially Sydney, Perth, the US and Germany.
I hadn't realized until recently that Australia had all those half-hour time zones.
WA don't see itself as in a completely different area, but we're 3 hours behind Melbourne and a 4.5-hour flight.
The old Jimmy Buffett, Alan Jackson song about it's 5 o'clock somewhere. It's much easier to make it 5 o'clock somewhere if a lot of the world is on the half hour. So I think I would like to take some diving into diagnostics and particularly NITs, because if we're talking about confounders of incretins, whether GLP-1s or just here's a data point. Lilly also announced they sold $175 million of tirzepatide in the first 6 weeks on market. That's a lot. Fast. So all this is going to create challenges for diagnostics also. And I believe that patients would be better served by payers taking a more educated perspective, including liver-aware diagnostics for every patient anywhere in the metabolic spectrum, because that's going to be the best way to protect against not getting livers treated when they should be or getting them treated when they shouldn't be, which are the things I think we're going to want to avoid.
And I think that has the positive benefit of finding liver disease and those at highest risk of liver cancer while looking for something else. That's where we might be able to tip this back into our balance of preventing liver cancer and early mortality due to those sort of areas.
Agreed.
By all means, contact me if you want those. We can help on that one.
Look, I think the challenge is going to be where the money comes from to do that, though, because the diagnostics companies are typically not big investors in mass education. So we'll see. At any rate, Jörn, you've been great to stay up this entire time because I know you're tired. Louise, you've been great to be energized this entire time because it's still 4:30 in the morning where you are. And my voice hasn't entirely given up, so I think we're all good. We will be back next week. I'll be back with Business Report in a couple of minutes, and we'll be back next week. It's good to see you guys. It's good to be doing this again.
Obviously, we got to go podcasting more frequently again to catch up on all those topics.
Absolutely.
Well, we're going back to we're going back to weekly is what we're going to do. The every other week just doesn't work on anybody's schedules. So we're going back to weekly. That's what we're going to do. Thanks, folks.
See you soon.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
And now for the first business report of Season 5.
Slava Ukraini, glory to Ukraine, and also Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live. Pardon me if this next section sounds a little bit like a rant. When I wrote the original draft for this business report, it was Tuesday morning, February 6th, and it seemed likely that the combination border Ukraine-Israel legislation would go through the Senate and maybe the House. Now it's 7 or 8 hours later in the eastern U.S., and the bill is supposed to be dead. In Ukraine, Israel, and Gaza, people will die because of the self-centeredness of some American politicians. I intend to post our interviews from last year with Tetiana Deshko and Oren Shibalet on LinkedIn and perhaps other channels so that people of goodwill can hear the true, thoughtful, pained voices of Ukrainian and Israeli health professionals who are also citizens and who are living through their own horrors. To hear their pain, appreciate what's happening in their countries in Gaza, and to give up on the ability to make it stop just because there's an election in 9 months and some guy can't find anything else to run on is just unspeakably cruel. Okay, rant over. Gloriam Slava, glory you heroes, and also Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live.
You heard the co-hosts. It's great to be back.
We all miss being away in January. We're all happy to be back. Weekly podcasting starts again now with a new, broader, exciting set of issues.
Our new Question of the Week segment starts later this month.
I mentioned the Question of the Week concept at the end of the main episode. I'll have more on this in the next week or two, and we'll kick it off later in the month with our nomenclature episode. In the meantime, save your questions. We're going to want to hear them and answer them, maybe talk with you about them.
The first vault of 2024 will be next week.
We've never done an episode like this to start a year before, so there's no logical vault to pull up. We'll have a vault episode back next week where we're doing the more typical kind of thing. So that's it for this week. I want to thank our team, Jörn, Louise, Mike, Eric, Steve, for pulling this together and rebooting for our 5th year. Next week, we'll be back with a group of stakeholders looking at one of the major upcoming 2024 issues in Nashville. We have a list of 4 or 5. Not sure which one we're going to touch next. Until then, stay safe, surf on. It's great to be back. We'll see you next week on the podcast. Bye-bye now.
Have any questions for the surfers? You can send them to questions@surfingmash.com and we will answer on the podcast or website. Your question might even wind up being the question of the week.